Have you ever stopped to genuinely picture the exact moment the entire electrical network goes silent for good? Not a flicker or a brief outage, but a deep, permanent darkness that swallows the city whole? Most folks comfort themselves with the fantasy that there will be a calm window, a gentle lead-up where they can casually grab supplies and figure things out. That is dangerously naive. Within the opening 6 hours of a genuine nationwide blackout, every single retail shelf holding life-sustaining gear would be stripped bare faster than your brain can process the danger. We are about to walk through the dozen specific categories of goods that would evaporate from public access before the majority of the population even grasps the severity of the situation. If this kind of foresight and strategic thinking is something you value, then do yourself a massive favor and click that subscribe button below immediately, because this is exactly what we do here at my channel. We unpack the scenarios that keep you awake and give you the edge to stay ahead. Let us begin with the most painfully obvious yet most critical resource: clean drinking water. That shrink-wrapped case of bottles would be the inaugural casualty of the crisis. Human wiring is simple. We know we die without hydration. Therefore, within the first hour, potentially even within the first 20 minutes of panic setting in, there would not be a single sealed container of water left for miles. We are talking about entire pallets hoarded into pickup truck shelves that look like they have been power washed with a vacuum and zero inventory remaining. And here is the nuance that escapes the untrained mind. It is not solely the individual bottles. Those massive 5-gallon jugs used for office coolers would be hoisted and hauled away. Those premium electrolyte-infused waters that sit on the shelf gathering dust due to their absurd price tag would be snatched without hesitation. The logic shifts from cost to survival. People will seize any vessel that traps moisture. The standard calculation for human sustainability hovers around 1 gallon per individual per day, strictly for drinking and minimal cleanliness. A household of 4 therefore requires roughly 14 gallons just to make it a single week without serious health decline. Now run that math against the inventory of a mid-sized suburban superstore when 500 panicked neighbors have the exact same realization simultaneously. Water is not just a beverage, it is the currency of existence, and the market closes fast. Next on the vanishing timeline, we move into the realm of shelf-stable sustenance, specifically metal-canned provisions. This is where the psychology of the raiding party gets intricate because there exists a clear pecking order of what vanishes first. Canned proteins such as tuna flakes, chicken chunks, and processed ham loaves are the vanguard of this movement. They deliver critical muscle repair fuel without requiring a single spark of heat or flame, which is paramount when your stove is now a cold steel monument to the past. Following close behind are the canned green soups and stews. Only after the savory and the substantial are gone do people pivot toward preserved fruits or pie fillings. The common thread is not gourmet taste, it is caloric density and the sacred pop-top lid. Why? Because the humble manual can opener is often forgotten in the adrenaline haze of a bug-out dash. Beans, chilies, ravioli, and mystery hash become the new 5-star cuisine. If it is sealed in tin and registered as edible, it is getting loaded onto a flatbed cart. The truly fascinating behavioral shift occurs around the 2-hour mark when you witness rational adults hoarding items they have actively avoided their entire adult lives. Canned seafood of dubious origin, vegetables that look like alien specimens, and meat products with vague ingredient labels. The primal survival mechanism in the brainstem completely overrides any gourmet preference or dietary snobbery. Retailers stock thousands upon thousands of units for a standard week of commerce. But when a swarm of 300 individuals each decides they need 40 cans for the bunker, that inventory graph plummets from full to zero in a literal heartbeat. The third entry on this roster might catch the average viewer off guard. Portable power cells, commonly known as batteries. Every single cylindrical unit of stored energy, regardless of size or voltage, would be swept clean. The AA, the AAA, the chunky D cell, the square 9-volt, and even the bulky 6-volt lantern bricks would become extinct in the retail ecosystem. What triggers this specific stampede? It is the sudden collective memory of all the gadgets stashed in the junk drawer that are useless without a charge. Tactical flashlights, emergency weather radios, and children's noise-making toys suddenly represent a lifeline to sanity and safety. In a world where the grid is a ghost, batteries become the new electrical standard. You need to pierce the darkness after sunset. You need a radio to understand if this is a localized event or a continental shift. And you need a dozen other tiny motors to keep some semblance of normalcy. The critical flaw in the system is that big box retailers do not warehouse these items for apocalypse-level demand. They maintain a stock density appropriate for a Tuesday afternoon replacement purchase, not for existential panic. You might observe an aisle end cap that appears full, but that visual depth represents maybe 300 total packages. When a single family unit decides they need 24 packs just to feel secure, that inventory collapses with breathtaking speed. And here is a bit of wisdom from the seasoned preparedness community. Those oddball battery sizes that never seem to move off the peg hooks are gone too, because in a vacuum of resources, anything is better than nothing. Fourth, in this cascade of disappearance, we find artificial light sources, namely portable torches and wax candles. The setting of the sun becomes a psychological trigger of immense power during a blackout. Modern existence is engineered around the complete eradication of shadows. We flood our homes and streets with photons constantly. Remove that security blanket and the human psyche begins to erode rapidly. Flashlights become the most sought-after tool in the building. The cheap plastic giveaway ones, the heavy-duty aircraft aluminum tactical models, and the novelty keychain squeeze lights would all be stripped from their packaging with no regard for price tags or lumens ratings. Headlamps that free up the hands are worth their weight in silver. Lanterns that can illuminate a room become holy relics. And when it comes to wax and wick, the situation is absolute bedlam. Scented jar candles meant for cozy autumn evenings, emergency pillar candles, religious prayer candles in tall glass tubes, and even the tiny birthday cake spikes would be scraped from the shelves by the fistful. The hunger for lumens extends to anything that glows. Those chemical light sticks that kids wave at fireworks displays would be hoarded as if they were gold bullion. Solar-powered garden pathway stakes would be ripped out of the lawn and garden section because someone realized they charge by day and glow by night. Even those plastic nightlights shaped like cartoon heroes would find a new home because when your world is pitch black, any source of light, no matter how faint or childish, is a beacon against the void. Number 5 on the countdown deals with portable combustion, and it is a category that goes far beyond just filling up the gas tank. We are talking about all sources of stored thermal energy. Propane cylinders of every dimension, camping fuel canisters, kerosene jugs, lump charcoal briquettes, accelerants, and fire starter logs. The reason this category vaporizes so swiftly is tied directly to the human stomach and the need for warmth. The instant the microwave clock goes blank, people realize their gourmet kitchen is now a useless museum of stainless steel. The backyard grill or the camp stove tucked away in the garage instantly transforms into the primary cooking apparatus. Those little green 1-pound propane bottles that screw onto portable stoves are gone within a window of mere minutes. The larger 20-pound tanks that fuel the summer cookouts would be the subject of tense negotiations and possibly outright theft. Sacks of charcoal become precious because they are the key to boiling water and searing whatever meat is rapidly thawing in the dead freezer. Lighter fluid and strike-anywhere matches become the new gold standard because generating a flame without a spark is a skill that has atrophied in the modern man. Even those little catering tins of gelled alcohol meant to keep buffet trays warm would be scooped up without a second thought. The infrastructure of retail simply cannot support this surge. Fuel is bulky, heavy, and often seasonal. A hardware emporium might have a respectable backstock, but against a tide of hundreds of desperate households, it is like trying to stop a flood with a paper towel. Coming in at the 6th position is the entire pharmacopoeia of the retail shelf and all adjacent trauma care supplies. This is the silent killer of the unprepared because it is so often overlooked until the headache hits or the child scrapes a knee. Every single bottle box and blister pack of non-prescription relief would be gone. Anti-inflammatory pills like ibuprofen and naproxen sodium are wiped out. Acetaminophen and aspirin vanish. Decongestants, antihistamines, and antidiarrheal medications are looted with the same fervor as the water aisle. The logic is brutally clear. The infrastructure required to fill a prescription is dependent on the very power that just failed. If you need a specific medication and you have only 3 days left on the bottle, that is a ticking clock you cannot rewind. The trauma care aisle suffers an equally devastating fate. Adhesive bandages in all shapes and sizes, rolled gauze, sterile pads, triple antibiotic ointment, isopropyl alcohol, and hydrogen peroxide are all sucked into the void. Suddenly, the average citizen realizes that a minor slip with a knife while trying to open a can of beans without an opener could turn septic and lethal without a functioning hospital. Even the ancillary tools like digital thermometers, tweezers for splinters, and bandage scissors become critical assets. The pharmacy zone of any large retailer would resemble the aftermath of a storm surge within the first handful of hours. Prescription drugs remain locked behind the counter, but anything on the open floor becomes fair game, and it is a game everyone plays to win. Seventh on our list touches on the digital tether we all share: portable phone battery reserves and external power banks. In the opening act of a grid failure, cellular communication towers often still hum along on backup diesel generators for a limited window. That window creates a mad rush to keep the smartphone alive because the device has become a prosthetic extension of the brain. Every power bank, every lipstick-sized emergency charger, every heavy-duty solar folding panel, and every 12-volt car adapter would be grabbed with both hands. People will not just buy one unit, they will stack them like poker chips, thinking that if they can just keep the signal alive long enough, rescue will come, or they can say a final digital goodbye. Even if the cell towers eventually sputter and die, the impulse in the moment is not to accept the silence, but to fight against it tooth and nail. A large electronics retailer might have a few hundred units in their cage, but that inventory is laughably small when 1,000 people decide they each need 3. The appetite extends to the lifeblood of these devices, the charging cables and wall adapters. In a world that has become so deeply dependent on the constant flow of information and the illusion of connection, the sudden deprivation of that signal creates a psychological vacuum that is almost as painful as physical thirst. The 8th category represents the shift from consumer to producer, the realm of manual implements and hardware. This is where you witness the great dividing line between those who think ahead and those who are purely reactionary. Hand tools would evaporate from the shelves at an alarming rate. Specifically, the manual can opener becomes the unexpected king of the hour because everyone who just filled a cart with 50 cans of soup is standing in the parking lot realizing they have no way to access the contents. Beyond the opener axes for processing fallen limbs, hammers for securing plywood over broken windows, heavy gauge nails, rope for lashing duct tape for everything, and waterproof tarps would all be cleared out. In a world where the cordless drill battery is a paperweight, a manual crosscut saw is the only way to generate firewood. A spool of paracord and a blue tarp can become a shelter, a water catchment system, or a stretcher. Duct tape retains its mythical status as the universal repair tool. Even the humble 5-gallon plastic bucket is recognized as a multi-use marvel for hauling water, storing grain, or even acting as a makeshift commode. Hardware depots would be swarmed not by contractors looking for a weekend project, but by civilians trying to backfill the gap left by dead power tools. An interesting side note here is that many individuals would grab tools they have zero idea how to properly use or maintain simply because the object itself exudes an aura of utility. And in a barter economy, that instinct might actually pay off. Number 9 brings us to a category that is often the butt of jokes until the water stops running: personal sanitation and hygiene consumables. While it does not scream urgency like an empty stomach, the reality is that disease and discomfort follow closely on the heels of filth. Toilet tissue would be the mascot of this panic wave. We witnessed a milder version of this during recent global health events, but in a true grid-down collapse, the velocity of the hoarding would be multiplied by a factor of 10. Every roll, single-ply or triple-ply, quilted or recycled, would be gone. Paper towels would follow suit, but the drain on this aisle goes much deeper into the personal care section. Bar soap, liquid body wash, shampoo, conditioner, toothpaste, dental floss, deodorant sticks, and critically feminine sanitary products and infant diapers would all be scooped into carts with grim determination. Maintaining a baseline level of clean when the municipal water pressure drops to 0 is a logistical nightmare, and wet wipes specifically become a luxury item beyond compare because they provide a waterless shower. Hand sanitizer would be hoarded in gallon jugs if available. For parents with small children, the sudden disappearance of diapers and formula is not an inconvenience. It is a crisis that can spiral into a health emergency within hours. The baby aisle would be a war zone, and the hygiene aisle would look like a vacuum had been applied to every shelf. Sliding into the 10th spot, we have a somewhat seasonal and time-sensitive target. Insulated containers and frozen water, commonly known as coolers and bagged ice. In those initial hours of confusion, a large portion of the populace is still operating under the assumption that this is a temporary hiccup. Their refrigerator and deep freezer are full of expensive cuts of meat and frozen vegetables. The instinct is not to accept the loss, but to buy time. Thus, every cooler in the store, regardless of size or quality, is purchased. The small lunchbox-sized soft coolers, the massive 100-quart roto-molded ice chests that cost a paycheck, and the cheap styrofoam disposable ones all become critical infrastructure for the temporary preservation of food. And the ice itself is gone before the freezers can even begin to warm up. People will load their carts with 20 bags of ice trying to turn their bathtub into a makeshift icebox. This specific behavior is fascinating because it represents the denial phase of the disaster. It is a physical manifestation of the hope that this will all blow over by morning. The thought process is, if I can just save this food, I won't have to dip into the canned reserves yet. It is a bridge strategy that highlights how long it takes the human mind to shift from temporary inconvenience mode to permanent new reality mode. The 11th item on the roster takes us back to the airwaves. Communication apparatuses that exist outside the cellular network. We are talking about battery-powered radios, walkie-talkie sets, and CB radio equipment. When the cell phone finally becomes a useless glass brick, the need for information does not go away, it intensifies. Everyone wants to know, is this just my street or is the entire coast down? Are there emergency services being coordinated or are we on our own? Every radio, especially the hand crank emergency models that function without batteries, would be snatched up in the initial rush. Weather band radios, AM and FM receivers, and shortwave scanners, if the retailer carries them, are all taken. Walkie-talkies become the family communication network, allowing parents to keep tabs on kids playing in the yard or neighbors coordinating a watch rotation. Even the low-power toy sets in the children's department would be appropriated for their potential, albeit limited, range. The modern retailer stocks very few of these items because the market has shifted entirely to smartphones. This scarcity of inventory means that the dusty shelf tucked in the back corner of the electronics section is emptied faster than any other category. That one display of emergency crank radios that has sat untouched for 3 years is gone before you can finish reading this sentence. Finally, rounding out the dozen is not a tangible good you can put in a bag, but rather a medium of exchange. Physical currency, specifically small denominations of cash and coinage. You might wonder how you can buy cash at a store, but the dynamic is tied to the point of sale and automated teller machines. A TMS would be drained hollow within the first few hours. There would be lines of people pulling out the maximum daily limit in hopes of having a safety net. But inside the grocery store, the mechanism is different. Everyone is paying for their hoard of supplies with $20 bills, and the cashiers quickly run out of 5s and 1s to make change. The coin vaults empty out because people are not waiting for their exact change. Meanwhile, the machines that convert loose change into vouchers are hit hard by people digging through their car consoles for quarters. The savvy among us recognize that when the digital ledgers blink off, the only thing that talks is the paper and metal in your pocket. Cash becomes the primary lubricant for the immediate shadow economy. The registers run dry of smaller bills, causing gridlock at the checkout lines, which in turn creates more friction and panic among those still waiting to get out of the store. It is a full-circle return to a pre-digital reality where the tangible feel of a banknote carries more weight than a credit score. That is the complete layout. The 12 categories that would be stripped from the public marketplace within the initial 6 hours of a sustained grid catastrophe. We have clean water, preserved proteins and vegetables, stored power in battery form. Artificial luminescence and flame, portable combustion sources, over-the-counter medicine and first aid mobile device, power reserves, hand-operated hardware, sanitation supplies, thermal preservation containers and ice alternate communication devices, and finally the return of paper currency. The truly sobering element of this entire breakdown is that none of this is theoretical fiction. We have observed these exact patterns in miniature during hurricanes, blizzards, and civil unrest. The only difference is the scale and the duration. A true continental grid failure takes this human behavior and supercharges it beyond the imagination of most civilians. Is the moment the lights flicker and die really the time you want to be making a shopping list? The window for intelligent, unpanicked preparation is not when the sirens are silent and the shelves are full. Take a moment to truly evaluate what 2 full weeks without any external support would look like for you and your household. No running water, no flush toilets, no refrigeration, and no ability to drive to a store for a missing ingredient. Acquire the baseline supplies now slowly, methodically, and without the weight of fear crushing your decision-making process. By doing so, you ensure that you are not the person elbowing a neighbor for the last dented can of creamed corn. If this deep dive into the mechanics of societal fragility provided you with a moment of clarity, then ensure you are subscribed to my channel. We are dedicated to dissecting these complex topics and providing the knowledge you need to navigate a world that is far less stable than it appears. Stay vigilant and stay supplied. Now, some of you might be processing this information and feeling a wave of existential dread creeping in. You might be questioning whether this is an overly cynical or pessimistic view of human nature in times of stress. Allow me to reframe that perception because it is crucial for your mental preparedness. We are not suggesting that people are inherently malicious or greedy at their core. What we are describing is the unvarnished reality of the fight or flight mechanism when it is triggered by the safety of one's own offspring or spouse. It is not about being a bad actor, it is about being a biological entity wired for survival. When a person genuinely believes that the well-being of their child hinges on securing that last flat of water, they will move heaven and earth to obtain it. It is not malicious, it is primal and visceral. Comprehending this distinction is critical because it reframes the entire preparedness narrative. You are not gearing up to defend against cartoon villains. You are preparing so that you do not have to join that frantic swarm. You are building a buffer so that you can remain calm, analytical, and helpful while the world around you spins into chaos. In an odd and paradoxical way, this level of personal readiness is an act of community service because it removes you from the demand side of the panic equation, leaving those scarce resources for those who truly failed to plan. Let us pivot for a moment to a factor that is often more corrosive than hunger, and that is the psychological erosion caused by the information vacuum. Consider the sensory whiplash of moving from a universe of constant streaming data alerts and notifications to an absolute void of silence. You cannot check the news. You cannot scroll social media. You have zero visibility on whether this is a localized event affecting only your county or if it is a coast-to-coast infrastructure failure. That ambiguity is a paralytic agent. It freezes rational thought. People do not know whether to shelter in place and ration their Cheerios or to pack the car and head for the hills. The fear of making the wrong choice with incomplete data drives much of the early chaotic behavior we have detailed. The people clearing shelves are not operating from a position of logical strategy. They are operating from a position of terrified confusion. They are grasping at anything that gives them a fleeting sense of agency or control over a situation that is utterly uncontrollable. When you internalize this, you recognize that preparation is as much a mental fortress as it is a physical pantry. It is having a pre-established framework of action so that you are not standing in the driveway with your keys in your hand, frozen by the infinite possibilities of a silent radio. There is also a social fabric dimension to this that is worth unpacking. History and disaster studies repeatedly show us that neighborhoods and communities that coalesce and cooperate survive and recover at a rate exponentially higher than lone wolf individuals or isolated nuclear families. In those opening 6 hours, however, community does not yet exist. Everyone is a frightened individual atom bouncing around in a jar. But by day 2 or 3, if the lights remain off, the natural human instinct to form tribes begins to reassert itself. The neighbor who happens to be a retired nurse suddenly becomes the most important person on the block. The family with the generator and the long extension cord becomes a hub of activity. You are no longer just protecting a household unit. You are contributing to a micro-society. This is not an argument for opening your supply cache to the entire zip code, but it is an argument for having a margin of surplus. A few extra cans of beans or a spare bottle of iodine tablets is not just a hedge against hunger, it is diplomatic currency and a tool for building trust. Communities that can organize can establish a rotating night watch. They can share specialized knowledge regarding water filtration or wound care. They can physically defend a perimeter against actual external threats far more effectively than one person staring out a dark window. The preppers who understand this social dynamic are the ones who navigate long-term disruptions with the most success and the least amount of trauma. Let us zoom out from that 6-hour window because that is merely the opening act of a very long and grim play. The fragility of the modern supply chain is a concept that most people have never truly visualized. If the electrical grid goes down, the pumps at the fuel depots stop working. If the pumps stop working, the fleet of 18-wheelers that resupply those grocery stores sit idle in a parking lot like beached whales. If the trucks do not roll those shelves, we just watched get emptied, remain barren not for days but for weeks or months. And the cascade does not stop there. Water treatment plants rely on electric pumps and computer controls to turn river water into tap water. Without power, the taps run dry. Hospitals have backup generators, but those require constant refueling with diesel that is no longer being delivered. The manufacturing of essential medications grinds to a halt. The refinery of crude oil into usable gasoline stops cold. This is not a temporary interruption of comfort. This is a systemic breakdown of the fundamental layers of technological civilization. The further you travel away from that initial 6-hour shock, the more pronounced the value of your own preparation becomes, because the marketplace as a concept simply ceases to function. There is nothing to buy because there is nothing to sell. Given this landscape, what is the pragmatic first step for someone who is just now starting to think seriously about resilience? The positive aspect of this equation is that you do not need to liquidate your retirement account or build a concrete bunker in the backyard by next weekend. The most intelligent and sustainable approach is one of slow, incremental accumulation paired with a focus on acquiring practical skills rather than just accumulating objects. Start with the foundational elements we have covered: water, food that does not require refrigeration, basic medical supplies, and a way to see in the dark. Aim for a 2-week buffer as the initial goalpost. While 2 weeks may sound like an overwhelming mountain of goods, it becomes entirely manageable when broken down over a few shopping trips. Next time you're at the grocery store, grab 3 extra cans of whatever you normally eat. Store a flat of water in the closet under the stairs. Pick up a decent LED flashlight and a pack of lithium batteries at the hardware checkout. Once that baseline is established, you can start thinking about the next tier of sustainability. What about a month of supplies? What about a small butane camp stove for heating water when the electric kettle is a brick? What about learning how to pressure can the harvest from your garden or how to safely filter standing water through a ceramic element? The individuals who navigate these storms with the most grace are not the ones who purchased a pallet of freeze-dried food last Thursday. They are the ones who have been quietly and thoughtfully layering their defenses for years. They have acquired skills that cannot be stolen or spoiled. They have thought through the problems, so they do not have to improvise solutions under extreme duress. There is also a sound financial case to be made for this approach that is rarely discussed. The items on this list are not exotics that expire next month. Sealed water in a dark, cool space is stable for years. Canned goods with proper rotation have a shelf life measured in multiple harvest seasons. Batteries stored properly retain their charge for a decade. These are not sunk costs that disappear if nothing bad happens. You are simply adjusting the timing of your consumption. You are buying the things you would eventually buy anyway, but you are doing it at today's prices with today's availability. It is not hoarding in the pathological sense of buying 50-year supplies of freeze-dried kale you will never eat. It is prudent household management. Anecdotally, most people who embrace this lifestyle find that their overall grocery bill actually stabilizes or decreases because they are no longer forced to make last-minute convenience store runs at inflated prices or pay for delivery fees due to a lack of planning. They have the buffer to wait for sales and buy in bulk at the optimal cost per unit. The most profound transformation, however, occurs between the ears. When you know with absolute certainty that you have a plan and the supplies to execute that plan, the world looks different. You are not the person with the 1,000-yard stare fighting over the last roll of paper towels. You are not the person making a fatal error in judgment because your brain is starved of glucose and flooded with cortisol. You are the person who can take a deep breath, assess the new facts on the ground, and move with calm deliberation. You become a resource of stability not just for yourself, but for those around you who are looking for a sane anchor in the storm. That internal peace, that quiet confidence that comes from being genuinely ready, is worth far more than the dollar value of the rice and beans in the basement. It is the difference between being a victim of circumstance and a navigator of it. And to be perfectly frank, that mindset translates into every other arena of life. People who are prepared for the metaphorical winter tend to be the ones who thrive in the summer. They are proactive rather than reactive. They build systems rather than just reacting to emergencies. We should also address the spectrum of possible events. Not every disruption is a doomsday movie. Regional blackouts, rolling brownouts, and ice storm outages are far more common, and while they lack the apocalyptic weight of a full grid failure, they are still profoundly inconvenient and dangerous for the vulnerable. The beauty of a robust preparedness plan is that it is modular. The same supplies that would sustain you for a month of societal collapse also make a 3-day power outage feel like a mildly boring camping trip rather than a crisis. You are covered if the weather turns ugly and the roads are impassable. You are covered if a seasonal bug sweeps through the house and you cannot make it to the pharmacy. You are covered if there is a temporary disruption in the supply chain for a specific ingredient. Preparedness is not a binary bet on the end of the world. It is an insurance policy with a wide net of coverage that improves your baseline quality of life across multiple scenarios. The reason we invest so much time and energy into these deep dives here at my channel is because this field of knowledge is genuinely fascinating and deeply relevant. This is not about living in a constant state of fear or paranoia. It is about living with the quiet satisfaction that you have looked at the hard problems and you have found answers. It is about becoming the type of person who meets challenges with a level head rather than being capsized by them. Once that mental switch is flipped, it changes the way you approach your career, your relationships, and your health. You develop a thicker skin. You cultivate a deeper reservoir of confidence. You become significantly less susceptible to the manipulation of the news cycle and the panic of the crowd because you are not operating from a place of scarcity. You are operating from a place of readiness. So as you sit with this information and process the weight of it all, remember that this is a marathon, not a sprint. You do not need to conquer this mountain today. Start with a single step. Add a little extra to the cart this weekend. Learn one new skill next month. Over the course of a single season, you can build a foundation of resilience that would shock you. You can become someone who is not just hoping for the best, but is actually equipped to handle the worst. And honestly, that is the most valuable takeaway you could possibly glean from this entire presentation. Not the specific list of items, but the actionable truth that you possess the agency to improve your situation starting right now. If this conversation struck a chord with you and you want to keep sharpening this edge, please take a second to hit that subscribe button for my channel. We are constantly rolling out new analysis and practical walkthroughs designed to help you think through these complex scenarios, master tangible skills, and truly understand how the systems around you actually function. You will get a notification whenever we drop new content, and you will be joining a community of forward-thinking individuals who value being ready more than being lucky. Thank you for spending this time with us, and remember to stay sharp and stay supplied.